who got the roll up. I'm tryna pull up. It seem like every time I show up, it gotta go up. See the drip, they see the glow up. Oh, now they know us. See, it's funny how my pockets out of shape, but I fit for the flex. Clear the phone call, hit my chick with a text. Parlay through the...
Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Ebony. So as promised, here is your day 5 recap of the Tory Lanez trial. Some things we're going to talk about in this video are definitely Kelsey's interview and recording. I also want to talk about the DNA not being found on the weapon, and last but not least, I want to talk about Megan's former bodyguard Justin being missing MIA and failing to comply with the prosecution's subpoena allegedly. So let's get into it. This case is really a mess. So on day 5, there was a lot that happened. The first most notable thing was that the jury heard the audio from Kelsey Nicole's interview in September, where she actually said that Tory Lanez did indeed pop Megan. Now, the recording was played after Kelsey took the stand and pretty much disavowed everything she said back in September, when she not only identified Tory Lanez as the person who did it, but also the things that Tory Lanez did to her after she was allegedly fighting with Megan. Now, in Kelsey's statement, she pretty much said once they left Kylie's house, they were in the SUV arguing, and so Kelsey came out and she told Tory Lanez, "You are not going to talk to my friend like this." When she stood up for Megan, this is where Tory Lanez said, "I don't know what you standing up for her for. She's been smashing every dude that you've been with for your whole life." And that's how the situation did escalate. Now, Kelsey also talked about the fact that she was extremely drunk throughout this situation, so she really couldn't recall what Tory Lanez was doing to her. But let's keep in mind, when Kelsey was booked and also was arrested, she did not have any injury. And if a man was putting his hands on you, like she said, why would you go meet up with Tory Lanez in a hotel room by yourself? So now we're at a point in the case where the jurors don't know what to believe. Do they believe Kelsey back in September, or do they believe Kelsey now? And I really think that the DA, it was a desperate attempt for them to try to make it seem like Kelsey in her testimony before was credible. And I think it may not hold as much weight as they think it will. Now, after they played Kelsey's entire recording, this is where we saw the prosecution call in the LAPD criminologist. And basically he explained that there were 4 casings recovered at the scene and they were matched to a 9mm. Now, he also said that the Escalade where Tory was seated, okay, this is where the weapon was actually recovered. Now, they also said to the jurors that the DNA testing was inconclusive to Tory Lanez, but that Peterson's DNA was not detected on the magazine. What does that mean? The magazine is what you load the weapon with. So he did not load the weapon. That's what that means. Also, we don't know if he touched the weapon at all because his DNA was inconclusive. They were unable to definitely say that Tory Lanez was out here popping that piece 5 times at Megan. Now, during this time, the defense attorney actually decided to call their own DNA expert. For those of you guys who don't know, the prosecution has not rested, but because the defense's witness, who is a DNA expert, had timing conflicts with his schedule, he was actually allowed to testify early. Both the prosecution and the defense agreed to this because he wouldn't be able to make trial on any other day but today. Now, the DNA expert for the defense team actually corroborated most of their statement, but there was something very important that the defense team's DNA expert said. They said this. They said Tory Lanez couldn't be ruled out as to being one of the people who contributed to the DNA found on the weapon, but there should have been a clear, conclusive result if Tory Lanez actually fired the weapon 5 times. The defense expert said this: if somebody is using that weapon and basically popping somebody or popping at somebody over 5 times, there should be a conclusive result that their DNA is on the weapon. They also said that a woman's DNA was also found on the weapon, okay? We all know that Kelsey Kelsey's hands had gunshot residue. All right. We also know from the body cam footage that Kelsey was pretty much hyperventilating, saying that she was so overwhelmed by what was happening. You also hear Tory Lanez telling Kelsey it's okay, they don't know what happened. So there's just a lot of gray area here, right? If he is using the gun repeatedly, you mean to tell me that there's no DNA from him? A lot of people are saying, well, he wiped the weapon, right? Tory wiped the weapon down. That wouldn't make any sense. If he wiped the weapon down, there would be no female DNA on the weapon. The weapon was recovered under Tory Lanez's seat. A woman couldn't have touched it after that, right? So this is just a very sticky situation, but I do want to make it clear that as of right now, Tory Lanez's DNA was not on that weapon. Also, we moved into this situation with not only the driver who pretty much went MIA, but Megan's former security guard Justin is also MIA. Now you guys remember that the prosecutors alleged that Tory Lanez, okay, called Justin over his house to get the stuff that Megan had at Tory's house to take it back to Megan. Justin then said that Tory apologized to him for popping Megan. You also had the text message from Kelsey where she said, "Help, Tory pop Meg, 911." Now in this instance, where is Justin the security guard? Well, he actually posted that he was doing security work for the FIFA World Cup out of the country. So there is probably a reasonable belief that he is attending the World Cup because he has a job out there. However, he still has not responded to the subpoena by the prosecution. And this tells me one or two things. One, he don't really care about it. Two, Tory never told him that. Three, the text message that Kelsey sent was something staged to make sure that none of them got in trouble. Or four, again, he don't care about it. So I don't know what's going on with Justin. He is currently missing in action. They are saying that they are going to do everything they can on not only the prosecution side, but also the defense's side to ensure that he is compelled to come to court. And so there is more to come on this, you guys. This situation is just a mess. I'm gonna go ahead and play a legal synopsis of the day 5 so you guys can get a more legal perspective, and we'll talk very soon when we have more information.
Week 1 has come to a close. We heard the rest of Kelsey Harris's recorded interview with the district attorney and their investigator. Let me catch you up on everything that went on. 2 ways you can look at this recording. 1, it's her honest account of what happened. She sounds confident. She sounds poised. She's telling you every single thing in sequence. 2, you can look at it as somebody who's giving rehearsed statements to police because she's guilty of crimes and doesn't want to tell the truth, and she's got her lawyers on the line and 2.5 years to prepare, so she spins a nice little story that makes her and Meg look good. I don't know, you be the judge. In her recorded testimony, she tells the whole story of what happened. We go to this gathering at Kylie Jenner's house. Apparently when you go to a gathering at Kylie Jenner's house, it can be pretty cool. There's lots of security, as many as 6 when you pull up. OBJ is there. It's like a hotel. You get your own room to check into. Quite fan. The whole issue of Kylie and Tory and Meg getting jealous and them trying to pull Meg out, and then they leave and then they come back because Meg said she forgot a slipper, and then Kylie kicks them out, and now we're in the car. Tory's saying stuff like, "Hey Meg, why don't you tell your friend what's so funny," referring to the fact that Meg backdoored Kelsey by hooking up with Tory, and then they're like getting back at him like, "Yo, whatever, you this, you're that." She's making fun of his career. "You're only relevant because you were on a Jack Harlow feature." He's popping shit like, "Yo, I'm from Canada." Car, they both get out of the car. She sees Tory hop from the back to the front. He's got a gun and he points it and he shoots at Megan. That's the recorded statement. Does that add up and mesh with everything else? Well, how did the jewelry fall? How did the necklace get on the floor? She says, well, that's Tory physically assaulting me, and that's how all that happened. As far as her and Meg getting into an altercation, no mention to the police on the recorded interview. Was there a police officer or a detective from the LAPD at that interview treating it like she might be a suspect or hostile? Absolutely not. If you ask me, I don't think Tory was the only aggressor putting hands on people. That's what I get, if you ask me, when you look at the very different stories that everybody's telling and the part that the 2 females don't want to talk about. Remember the physical statures of the people involved. The idea that only men can physically assault women is a common misconception and not at all accurate. That's the shooting. Then they all get back in the car. They're driving. Kelsey texts my security. She texts the security. That's the text. Tory shot Meg. 911. Is that a real text? Is that a cover-up? And then the rest was all of the aftermath. That when they get released, that there were indications made to her from Tory's team that they would invest in her business or that they'd be willing to talk to her about giving her money. Whether any of that was a bribe or was taken, Kelsey denied. And then what happened afterwards in terms of her communications with other people post the incident? She said that she basically never has talked to Meg. They had one conversation. Meg and her team were lying to her and saying that, hey, I'm really badly injured. I'm going to be out of commission for probably at least a year. There's nothing for you to do here. You need to get out of LA. And they basically shooed her away and sent her on to Houston, and she hasn't heard from her since. The recording ends with the prosecutors asking that, hey, are you just saying all this to get back into Meg's good graces? And she says, no, I'm saying all this to relieve myself of the burden of this. I just want to move on from it. On cross-examination, the defense highlighted a couple key facts about this interview. One, there was no police presence, nobody investigating or asking Kelsey hard questions. Two, there was no grant of immunity to Kelsey at that time. So if she did have stuff to hide her own criminality, she would not have been immune from making statements, and so she had an incentive to lie. Three, they had asked her during the interview about certain text messages that might be relevant to the investigation, but there was no follow-up. They never went back and said, hey, can we get those text messages? And four, the idea that her lawyers were on the line and that this is rehearsed, prepared testimony that she had a lot of time to get ready for and give. Like I said, ultimately, what do you make of that recording? Well, you're going to listen to all the evidence in this trial. Trial continues next week, and then you're going to make your decision on who's lying, who's telling the truth. How did those bullet fragments get into Meg Thee Stallion's foot? And is Tory Lanez guilty or not guilty? Find out all that and more next week for exclusive, additional, interesting tidbits. Check out the subscription here on the main page. You will see posts about the DNA expert and the ballistics expert who testified today. But you're going to have to wait for that because I got to get some dinner. Let me catch you up on what happened with the DNA experts. So both of the DNA experts said pretty much the exact same thing with very minute differences. Here's the basics, and then I'll tell you what I think. So they both said that the magazine was tested, and there were 4 DNA profiles on the magazine, and you can tell that none of those are Tory's. So most likely Tory never touched this magazine. On the gun, they both said the same thing, that there's 4 profiles on the gun, but it's inconclusive. You can't tell if the DNA is Tory's or somebody else's. Now, both experts agreed that you would expect to see Tory's DNA on the gun if he had shot it 5 times. The defense experts seemed to go further and say, look, if he shot that gun 5 times and then they tested it, you would conclusively see that he's on it. You don't see that here, suggesting strong DNA evidence in Tory's favor. Now, then the prosecution went to try to discredit the defense expert. He's like, aren't you getting paid by the defense? Don't you always work for defendants? He's like, yeah, the LAPD has their crime prosecutor, and then defendants hire private companies like mine to do the forensics. It's like, oh, okay, well, how much are you getting paid? The guy's like $250 an hour. How much has he paid you total? The guy's like $6,000. It's like, oh, well, it was really kind of just like, look, there's experts, man. This guy's been doing it forever. He's like, are you accredited? And he's like, no, I didn't apply for accreditation. I'm certified by the same people who do accreditation. It's like, well, what does that mean? He's like, well, twice a year, our lab people all get tested. They send them blind samples. They have to do the analysis, send it back, and then we get the results. He's like, oh, okay, well, what are the results? He's like, well, we never got anything wrong. And the guy's like, how do we know that? He's like, I'm telling you. It's like, how do we know you're not lying? He's like, well, you can check. I'll show you the records. And then he just kept going on and on. Look, at the end of the day, the DNA evidence came out strongly, I think, in favor of Tory. We'll see where the rest of the trial takes us. There was one other part, the big part, which is that they never gave the crime lab Kelsey's DNA. And so on defense, the defense brought out this point that, hey, if you ever get a case file and there's 2 people with GSR, wouldn't you expect to get 2 people's DNA? And the guy's like, yeah, that would make sense. If there's 2 people who've tested positive for the GSR and we're testing one's DNA, we ought to test both DNA. Duh. Yo, it's true. The security guard for Meg Thee Stallion, the prosecution intended to call him as a witness. They were not able to produce him last week. Now, what's the significance of this? We were able to track him down and bring him in. I think the only thing the prosecution really wants him for is to have him say, hey, didn't you get this text message from Kelsey after the shooting? And they can show it to the jury again. I don't think the defense has anything for him.
Hold up, say what's the hold up? I got the pack, who got the roll up? I'm tryna pull up. It seems like every time I show up, it gotta go up. See the drip, they see the glow up. Oh, now they know us. See, it's funny how my pockets out of shape, but I fit for the flex. Clear the phone call, hit my chick with a text.